Hi friends, welcome to EduTap. So welcome to the Target NABARD Grade A and B 2019 5 MCQs a day series. Now this is lecture number 11, and as part of this series each day we come up with a discussion of 5 MCQs wherein we discuss the relevance of those questions plus the concepts behind those questions. Let us begin. So we know that the NABARD Grade A and B 2019 notification is out. The NABARD Grade A exam will be held on 15th and 16th of June 2019. NABARD Grade B on 16th of June 2019. The online registrations have begun, so please fill the form ASAP. 5 more days to go. So the last date is 26th of May 2019. So there are 8 vacancies released for Grade B and 79 vacancies for Grade A. We have had some excellent results previously, and EduTap has performed well. NABARD Grade A 11 selections in 2017 and 26 selections in the year 2018. We offer the courses for NABARD 2019, so you can have a look at the courses that are there. So there are courses separately only for NABARD Grade A as well. And if in case you have already taken our RBI course, then you can offer ARD course separately, Agriculture and Rural Development. And in case you want to prepare for both Grade A and Grade B, you can go for NABARD Grade B plus Grade A course, wherein you get phase 1 mock test plus phase 2 full video course. And in case you have already taken NABARD Grade A and you have to prepare, or you want to prepare for Grade B, then you can take the last course wherein we'll give you only the paper 3, right? So if you want to avail the discount that we are offering, that is 20%, you can use the code NABARD20. Now these are the combo courses that we offer, and to avail the discount of 30%, you can use the coupon code COMBO30 to avail the same. So friends, we also offer individual courses, which is RBI Grade B, SEBI Grade A, RP Assistant, IBPS AF4, and we also offer a QRE course, Quant Reasoning and English course for all banking exams. So friends, what are we going to discuss today? So today we are going to discuss two important processes, that is mineralization and immobilization. Now these two processes are very important when it comes to soil science, right? So what we shall be doing is we shall be seeing 3 questions that are taken directly from this concept, and we shall discuss this particular concept in detail. Then we shall see 2 simple questions further. Right? So let us begin. First, let us see the question. The question number 1 says, the soil environment can be divided into physical, chemical and biological environment. Soil organisms and the resulting reactions, that is mineralization and immobilization, can be called as what? So yesterday also we had a detailed discussion regarding these 3 types of environment of soil. So the answer to this question is biological environment. It is very important for us to know the context of everything. Only then we shall be able to link the topics. So that is why you need to understand that when we talk about mineralization, when we talk about immobilization, it refers to the biological environment of the soil. So this is the same thing that we had discussed yesterday, that a plant actually has 2 types of environment. One is aerial, that is above the ground, and the other is below the ground, right? So if you see that the soil environment can be divided into physical, chemical and biological. Right? So we had a detailed discussion. Kindly revise or have a look at it again. So you can see that when it comes to aerial environment, we are talking about solar radiation, rainfall, temperature, relative humidity and wind velocity. Now friends, for examination, what is important when it comes to this aerial environment? So what you need to do is, for the important crops, okay, for example rice, wheat, okay, cotton, for all the important crops, kindly make a list of those crops and refer to the maximum temperature, refer to the minimum temperature and refer to the optimum temperature. Okay, optimum temperature is also known as the cardinal temperature. So for each crop it varies. So we need to have an idea about what are these 3 temperatures for all the important crops. That is, this is a suitable temperature for that particular crop growth. That is the optimum temperature. So make sure that you make a list of those and memorize it for the examination. This is very important. The same thing, I will not repeat the values because in our previous lecture somewhere or the other we would have discussed it, but still let us revise. So the relative humidity, you need to know what is the correct value of the, or correct range of relative humidity that is required for the plants, right? So if you actually remember, we had actually discussed this also. So kindly write down in the comment section below So, and even the wind velocity, there's a particular range of wind velocity that is actually suitable for the plants. So like this, for each of the parameters, you need to be aware of what is the suitable range. Okay, and for example, when we talk about solar radiation, what do we need to know? We need to know the perfect range of photosynthetically active radiation, PAR. I'll just tell you, it is 400 to 700 nanometer. Okay, so this is something I want you to write down in the comment section so that it will be a kind of quick revision as well. Okay, now let us come to question number 2. So after the discussion of this question, let us go into the detail about these two processes that we were talking about, that is mineralization and immobilization. So in the question second, it says dash in soil science is a conversion of inorganic compounds to organic compounds by microorganisms or plants, by which it is prevented from being accessible to plants. So kindly have a look at the question. So we are talking about the conversion of inorganic compounds to organic compounds. Okay, so this process is known as immobilization. This definition is also important. There might be a question where only the definition is given and you need to find the term. Okay, so it is immobilization. Now let us have a look at what these two processes are. Okay, so here first have a look at the picture. The simple way to start understanding this is nitrogen actually exists in many forms. Okay, so that can be either organic form or it can be present in the inorganic form. Okay, now when we are talking about these two processes, we are referring to the conversion of nitrogen from one form to the other. Okay, now depending upon which form is converted into what, we give two different names to these processes. Let us talk about mineralization. So when we say that the organic nitrogen is converted into inorganic nitrogen, for example, ammonium, that is NH4+, that time this entire process is referred to as mineralization. Now, the opposite of it, that is when the inorganic nitrogen, that may be ammonium, that is NH4+ ion, or it may be nitrate, that is NO32-. Okay, so when you convert this inorganic nitrogen into organic nitrogen, it is called immobilization. So it is pretty clear that immobilization is a reverse of mineralization. Don't get confused. Always remember what is converted into what in each of these two processes, right? Next, there's one more point to remember, that plants can take in nitrogen only in the inorganic form. Now, this is very important thing to know. Plants always consume nitrogen which is present in the soil in the form inorganic. Okay, so kindly pause this video and just have a look at these definitions again. Now what we shall be doing is we shall be going into these concepts of mineralization and immobilization a bit deeper. Okay, so let us take an example and try and understand what these two processes depend on. Okay, now before we begin, you need to understand that there's a concept called C/N ratio. And these two processes that we are talking about, be it mineralization or immobilization, is solely or at least majorly dependent upon this C/N ratio. Now, what is the C/N ratio? As you can yourself comprehend that when I talk about C, we are telling the parts of carbon. And when I say N, I'm talking about the parts of nitrogen. Okay, so depending upon this particular ratio, these two processes are initiated. Okay, now just consider a plant. There is a soil here on which the plant rests. You have soil organisms inside the soil, right? These may be the microorganisms. Now, these microorganisms or the soil organisms are actually responsible for the decomposition. Now, what do they decompose basically? They decompose whatever organic matter or the crop residue or maybe the decaying plant parts. So all these things are actually decomposed by the soil microorganisms. Okay, so we are clear till now. Now what happens is, now suppose if there is a crop residue. Now suppose if there on the same field there was previously some other crop that was planted. Now after that crop was harvested, certain crop residues left behind. Okay, not everything is cleared. Okay, so this crop residue that is there in the soil will be decomposed by this soil organism to release the required nutrients. Okay, so that is the process that usually happens. Now what we understand is, as I had already told you, that when nitrogen is taken up by the plants, it is taken up in the form of inorganic form. Okay, so now let us, keeping this understanding in mind, now you take a crop residue that is added to the soil, for example. Now this crop residue will have a C:N ratio. That is, it will contain certain parts of carbon to certain parts of nitrogen. Okay, now what happens is, there are two scenarios. This is a bit of a tricky process. You need to keep patience and try and understand these things. Now first thing, there is a C:N ratio that is high. Okay, and the second scenario is C:N ratio that is low. Now what we shall be doing is, we shall try and understand each of these scenarios and how, because of these two scenarios, the process of mineralization and immobilization is taking place. Okay, now what happens is, we have a benchmark first, that is 30:1. That is 30 parts of carbon for every 1 part of nitrogen. Kindly memorize this benchmark. Now what happens is, if the C:N ratio is high, that is for every 1 part of nitrogen there is more than 30 parts of carbon, then we call it as a high C:N ratio. Okay, so keep this in mind. So if I say 80:1, it is a high C:N ratio, because for every nitrogen the number of carbon parts is more than 30. Okay, now if I say 20:1, I'm saying it is a low C:N ratio, because for every 1 part of nitrogen we have carbon parts that are lesser than 30. Okay, so what happens is, when you have a crop residue, that crop residue would have certain C:N parts. Okay, now these soil organisms, what they do is, they decompose the carbon which is present in the crop residue. Okay, now to decompose this carbon which is present in the crop residue, it requires the help of nitrogen. So this is a concept that you need to understand. So what it does is, when the crop residue is present, the soil organism would try to decompose the carbon which is present in the crop residue, and in order to decompose that particular carbon, it uses nitrogen. Right? Till now we have understood this. Now let us start with the first scenario. So we are having a crop residue that is having a very high C:N ratio. So what happens is, let us for example keep it as 80:1. That's a very hypothetical thing. Let us just consider this. Okay, so now when we add this crop residue into the soil, this soil organism, what it does is, it has so much of carbon to decompose. Usually we saw that if it is near about 30, it is okay. Okay, so it can easily use the available nitrogen and decompose the carbon. But here you're seeing that the amount of carbon is huge, very high C/N ratio, and the availability of nitrogen is not sufficient for it to decompose the available carbon. So what it does is it starts taking all the nitrogen that is present in its environment so that it can use that nitrogen in the decomposition of the available carbon, that is this 80 parts of carbon in the crop residue. So what it is doing is it is locking all the nitrogen that is present in the soil for its decomposition process. So what it is doing, basically it is converting all the nitrate, that is inorganic form of nitrogen, whichever is present in the soil, it is pulling that nitrogen and converting it into organic form and using it. So what is happening here, you can see when we had discussed that when the inorganic nitrogen is converted into organic form, we call it as immobilization. That was a thing that we had discussed earlier. So now the soil organisms start this process of immobilization where all the nitrates present in the soil is locked for its process of decomposition. Now what will happen, because all the nitrate is utilized by the soil organism, the plant, which is very important here, is not getting any nitrogen for its use. So basically immobilization results in the deficiency for some time of nitrogen for the plants. Okay, so we can see here that the available nitrogen is already locked. So the now plants do not have any nitrogen for its use. So this is the process of immobilization. So when we have a high C/N ratio, we see that the process of immobilization starts. Okay, now let us consider the second scenario. The second scenario is a low C/N ratio. For example, say 20:1. So now what happens? Whatever carbon that is present in the crop residue is already less, okay, and the nitrogen which is present along with this is more than sufficient to break that carbon down. Okay, so what happens is actually there is extra amount of nitrogen. So the microorganisms would utilize the amount of nitrogen that is required to decompose the carbon, and it will be left with an extra nitrogen parts. Okay, so now those parts would be converted into inorganic form, and we see the process of mineralization. So when we see the process of mineralization, what is happening? The organic form is converted into inorganic form, that is nitrate, NH4 plus. Okay, basically it is first converted into NH4 plus and then nitrates. Okay, so here you're getting inorganic form of nitrogen. Now this inorganic form can be very well utilized by the plants. Okay, so you need to actually understand these concepts, that when we are referring to immobilization, the availability of nitrogen is blocked for plants because all the nitrogen that is available is being utilized by the soil organisms for its decomposition process. When we come to the process of mineralization, the organic nitrogen, because it is extra and the soil organisms actually do not require it more, what they do is that particular nitrogen gets converted into inorganic form. Now this inorganic form is very well utilized by the plants because that is a suitable form for it. So the same thing is actually mentioned here. Now, if you have understood what I was just explaining, when you pause this video, when you read this particular slide, you would be able to understand and make sense of each and every line which is written here. So kindly pause the video and make sure that you read this 2 to 3 times to actually assimilate what we have just discussed. Now here is a diagram. Actually you don't need to go very detailed into it, but just understand that when C/N ratio was high, you can see it is like nearly 60. Okay, so that time which process happens? Immobilization happens. And because of immobilization, what is happening? Whatever nitrogen is present is being locked in for decomposition process by the soil organisms, and because of that the availability of nitrogen to the plant is restricted. right? And then after that, you need to understand the process here, that when immobilization starts, okay, that means the amount of carbon would start reducing. Now, why would it start reducing? Because it is already, the organisms are already using nitrogen and they are decomposing carbon and releasing carbon dioxide. So what is happening? The carbon is present. Microorganisms are utilizing nitrogen to actually decompose this carbon, and then they are releasing carbon dioxide. So what is happening? Automatically the carbon is getting reduced. So when we start with a high C is to N ratio, ultimately the ratio is going to get reduced. Okay, so when the ratio is going to get reduced, what process starts? Mineralization process starts. And there's one more thing, friends. What happens is, when in the final phase, when the mineralization process starts, the organisms start dying, okay, and because of their dying, the nitrogen is actually released in the form of ammonium. Okay, so you can just see this third part, the final phase, net mineralization. Okay, the microorganisms are dying and ammonium level is increasing. The ammonium that was part of the microorganism is now available in the soil. Carbon compounds are decomposed. As I told you, that as the decomposition process starts, the amount of carbon or the number of carbon parts will be reduced and the carbon dioxide would be increased. Okay, and because we are moving towards the end, that is towards the fag end, we have already decomposed the available carbon, so the amount of CO2 production is going to be low. So ultimately we will reach a stage where C is to N ratio is going to be low. Now friends, this is a tricky process. Sometimes it might be a situation where you would not be able to understand it very clearly, but believe me, you need to revise it ample number of times. You can even pause the video and have a look at these 3 stages again. Just try and read each of these phases, understand what they're trying to tell, and you would be able to get the process very easily. Now there's one more thing, how is these process actually going to help farmers, or why do we actually need to know about these processes? The thing is, whenever we are adding something for the growth of plant, okay, so we need to know the C is to N ratio of it. This is very important. Its significance, just now we have realized that if we do not have a correct C is to N ratio, the availability of nitrogen to plant is going to be low, and because of that we can experience a nitrogen deficiency in plant, and ultimately it is not good for the crop yield. Okay, so we need to choose those kind of crops for which we know the C's to N ratio, and accordingly we can adjust the amount of fertilizer that we need to use. Okay, now here you can see that there are certain kind of crops like legumes. Now these have a low C's to N ratio, and there are certain kinds of crops like rice, corn, they have a high C's to N ratio. So what happens is, when we are doing crop rotation, okay, like in the same field, if you are planting, for example, crop 1 that is having a high C's to N ratio, what we need to do is, in the next cycle we need to plant a crop 2 which actually has a low C's to N ratio. Because of this, a proper balance is going to be maintained, and this is actually going to help a lot in the maintaining the soil fertility as well as the crop yield. So now we have come to question number 3. So it says, dash in soil science is a decomposition, that is oxidation of the chemical compounds in organic matter, by which the nutrients in those compounds are released in soluble inorganic forms that may be available to plants. So just now we have had enough elaborate discussion about these two processes. So immediately you need to pick the answer. The answer for this question is mineralization. Next, two factual questions. So, who among the following concluded for the first time that the main principle of vegetation is water? So, the answer to this question is Van Hemont. Kindly memorize this. Friends, you can see a picture that is taken from Yellamilla Reddy. That's a book, a very important book. So here you can see that whichever we have marked using a marker, kindly pause the video and go through these important points. Okay, so sometimes, you know, in exam these type of factual questions are also asked. So just make sure that you go through them at least twice or thrice. So friends, the last question for discussion is the Imperial Agricultural Research Institute, IARI, was started at Pusa in Bihar in which of the following years? So right now you can see that this particular institute has been shifted to New Delhi, right? So let us see what is the answer for this question. So the correct answer for this particular question stands to be your third option, that is 1905, right? Now, these are the answers for the questions we have just discussed. In case you have missed upon the answers, you can have a look at the section as well. So friends, if you have any queries, you can drop us a mail at hello@edutab.co.in. You can give us a call on 8146207241. You can go to our website if you want to have a look at the course features, www.edutab.co.in. So till then friends, thank you so much for watching and as usual, happy learning.